Welcome to Journey Through the Gate, the Paranormal Portal podcast, as we delve into the many questions and wonders brought on by this supernatural experience. What's on the other side of the gate? Let's find out together.
Here I am. Look, now the stuff's not working in the background again. Oh my gosh. Let's just get Donnie in here and figure out what kind of nonsense we're going to have tonight. Can you all hear me okay? Hey, Donnie.
Hi. I hear you okay.
Okay, cool. Let's see what's going on with this. So how was your day, Donnie?
It's pretty, it's all right. It's pretty good.
Yeah?
Yeah, nothing too much to write home about, but it's all right.
Yeah, I know.
Hey there,
It's like,
people.
maybe that's better. Let's see.
Yeah.
I got to turn on some lights here. I'm looking up and I'm going, oh my gosh, I got 5 minutes to get out there. Hey, everybody. Hello, Sasha Bell, Ted, Vixen Doe. Hello, Salvador. Bubbles Butterfly. Welcome in, Big Cole. Hello. So today I thought, it stuck in my craw a little bit that I'm sorry, guys. I'm still turning on all the stuff. Bear with me here. This is hard to do on a work night. Golly. So, what was I talking about? What's stuck in my craw? I got so many things stuck in my craw. About the videos, because they didn't play smoothly when we were playing them during the Chicago thing. So this morning I said, I'm going to see what happens. I'll just drop the St. Valentine's Day one, because I thought that was pretty good, and it deserves to be, if, some kid or something's doing a report or something. Gosh, do kids still do reports? I don't know. Do they still do that? Great to see you, Bubbles. So anyway, it's a quick little 18-minute video. Pretty much covers the St. Valentine's Day Massacre front to back. But in that too, with each one of the victims, I did the hearts. And it wasn't to mock them, I promise you, because I think they were done really dirty. I mean, they did pick the life. I started watching Boardwalk Empire because of all this again, to all 5 seasons. I got to do something to keep my mind off of stuff, and I love historical stuff. And if it's a little off, I usually know it's off because I know a little bit of the details and the things that they make up, but a lot of that stuff that went on around in Boardwalk Empire really happened. So I decided to drop that this morning. And when I did the victims, I gave them the hearts afterwards. And the last one I did was Al Capone, and then he got hearts because in my mind, he was kind of a victim too, because that ghost of Jimmy didn't let up until he made him absolutely nuts. So let that be a lesson for anybody who thinks about how ghosts can't harass you or they can't kill you. I mean, a lot of you might recall, or somebody in your family would say something like ghosts can't hurt you, they can make you hurt yourself or something like that, like running into a wall to get away from them or falling down the stairs to get away from them. I beg to differ, Donnie. What do you think?
I think a lot more people have died from ghosts than people are willing to admit. I think
100%.
Ghosts are responsible for things like heart attacks and
Yes.
serious chronic terminal diseases. And
Yes.
usually when people are diagnosed with these diseases, they don't think that it could be anything paranormal. I'm not saying it's all paranormal because there are
Correct.
lifestyle cases.
Right.
But
I agree.
when people say ghosts can't hurt you, I don't know. I've seen a lot of paranormal shows where they say like, yeah, these ghosts give you all these serious health issues and cause heart attacks.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of
Drain
people
your energy.
heart attacks. So
Yep. And yeah, I know, and I feel the same way. I mean, it depends on what time of the day you catch me, because I try to stay very focused in the light. But I'll tell you what, definitely, Lindsay. But and there's been all these times where people have gone, look, you got to get out of here because this is, hey, Blue, this is draining this person's energy. This is, absolutely, Vixen. But and I've seen plenty of people that poo-poo this whole thing and go in kicking down doors and challenging things that they can't see, and they don't even know who they're talking to. And God knows I've given my opinion on that multiple times on this podcast. But I wanted to point that out again about Al Capone, because many people saw that ghost. Many people, people quit, working in hotels, and things for Al, and, his, I don't want to say bodyguards, but people that were in his crew, right? And because of that ghost, and guards at, Alcatraz and things like that, he'd be in there screaming, quit it, Jimmy, leave me alone, and screaming, just losing his mind. And of course, they blamed it on syphilis. But again, like Donnie said, it's so easy to say it was old age, or it was a heart attack, or it was this, or it was that. I do believe that definitely happens. So that is the St. Valentine's Day Massacre is more of a good Halloween ghost story, as well as, organized crime. And, when does that go too far? And, all this other kind of, stuff. And, the whole genre around it. Somebody in here on another night said something about how we kind of romanticize the whole thing. And I think history in a lot of ways does that. But I'll tell you what, there was not one of them involved in, whether it was Chicago or New York or any of that, whether it was the women. I mean, all the women that got attached to these guys, they didn't have good stories, even the ones that were trying to pretend and having the big houses with the kids, and even those Sopranos and stuff. There was none of those people seemed happy. And if they did seem happy, they were probably batshit crazy. You know what I mean?
And I think the other potential hazard that ghosts can cause is mental illness.
Mm-hmm.
And in this country, when people are faced with mental illness, they usually go to a doctor and they get prescribed all these drugs, which, oftentimes actually
another good point
exacerbates the situation, because there's his problem mental illness in this country. So I feel like a lot more people are under paranormal attack than they are willing to admit.
Hmm.
Because
Hmm.
I know people who families who the kids say that they've seen this kind of ghostly apparition, but then the father doesn't believe in ghosts at all.
So
So then
true.
the problem gets left
Oh, Big
unchecked.
Cole, thank you, sweetheart. How
Hey,
kind of
thank you,
you.
Big Cole.
Thank you so
What a
much.
nice
That's
man.
very sweet. Yes, absolutely. Just an
Um,
absolute
and
delight.
I've
And
seen
thank
it
you.
firsthand where the parents they just ignore the problem, and as the kid gets older and older, they
Hmm.
start dealing with growing mental health problems that affects them in
Hmm.
their future.
And
And
lots of
then,
schizophrenia and
yeah,
things like that. And we're so quick to drug people instead of trying to love them through it, because if more people, back in my day, people would take the time. If you had a deaf child, you would sit and you would learn and try to bring the most of the world you could. Get barefoot on the floor and put speakers on the floor and feel the music and the vibration and things like that. It's not just give somebody a drug and make it go away. And I think a lot of people with abilities do the same. And people with abilities also, um, try to hold them down, and it's going to manifest. It's going to find a way out. It's going to find a way to manifest itself, whether it's PK things and stuff starts flying around your kitchen, or if it comes out as anger, or it's like, it's in that same category as trying to swallow down your feelings. I've been, thinking a lot about that. So we don't do that. Native Americans, and I certainly don't. I'm a redhead. You're gonna, if I'm around, if you had been in the room when my little guy decided to go on to the rest of his journey, I mean, it was like a banshee and a wood chipper, unashamed. You know what I mean? And just days of primal screaming. But when it's over, you're left with the the hollow, and then you try to get the next step and the next step and the next step. And there's a lot of Native American and tribal people who do that, and it's just you don't hide your grief. You put it right out front, kind of like the Southern people do with their crazy. They put their crazy right out front, put it on the front porch, and hand it a cocktail. Then keep an eye on it. You know what I mean? You just if you bottle this stuff up and you try to squish this stuff down, it's gonna manifest in other ways. It's coming out. So you might as well just get it out like a splinter, or or whatever, anything like that that causes that kind of festering, whether it's festering of your soul, or I bet you
hello,
that's my is
Facebook
that
user.
Michael? Is that you, Michael, Facebook user? So that's what I wanted to say about the great points, Donnie, and I agree 100%. Um, but I wanted to point that out again about Al Capone, and this whole thing about the ability of ghosts that have an agenda, whether it be to get you out of their house because they think you're intruding, or if it's something that follows you around or whatever. I mean, it's nothing to play with. It's certainly nothing to challenge, and it's nothing to mock. Like those people I told you about, would go to where the serial killer buried the bodies. And I'm hearing a lot today. Somebody said something about this Jeffrey Dahmer BS that's on. Why are we making these people famous? I can't
He's
wrap
like
my
a
head
comic
around.
book villain. It's the same way people are obsessed with the Joker, right?
Yeah,
They
but
just want like the most
young
dastardly of
teenage
dastardly,
this guy took young teenage boys, and the stuff that he did, and they have Halloween costumes of this, and in some cities they've had to ban this because this is what kids want to wear. They're not, put on the face of your grandfather who busted his ass on a farm for about 80 years to leave you a piece of land and loved you and fed you. Dress up as that character, or
Well, what about
or
all the
make up
fan
one.
mail? What about all the fan mail that these incarcerated
Sick,
serial killers receive from the general public, where they even get like
sick,
offers of marriage, and some
sick.
actually do,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah,
Um,
well, look at DeFeo, look at McDonald.
yeah. Well, I think
I
the
don't
Night
understand
Stalker
it.
wound up marrying a fan, and
I don't
just messed up
understand it,
people.
but
Messed up people.
I mean, if kids are doing that, I mean, I can understand too. There'd be an argument for everything. Don't dress up as Dracula. Don't be a, whatever. But I never liked the kids back in my day who thought they were going to go, real edgy and dress up as Hitler. There's no way my mother would have put up with that crap. So I mean, it's just, why do you want to, lift these people? So again, I'm not trying to lift the gangsters up at all. I'm certainly not. It's a terrible life, but it's something that happened. And none of those people seem to be happy to me. I don't care how much money they had. I don't care how many, girls and all this other stuff. And on the other end, the girls and the women and the kids and, everybody suffers, So,
Butterfly says, I live in Austin, Texas, and in San Antonio, they have a pizzeria with a Jeffrey Dahmer pizza. It's so disrespectful to the family.
Yeah, exactly. To not just the families, but, good taste. And I didn't mean that as a pizza reference. I meant it as just having your moral compass. A lot of people's moral compasses either never got into effect. Maybe it's because we're putting our kids all over real early or something. I don't know. I can't put my finger on it, but I just wanted to make that clear that I'm not uplifting these gangsters. It was a part of Chicago's history, and I think that it was an important event because it did seem to cross the line and got a lot of public view. And it also was part of the downfall. Everything started to fall apart after that, But it's the crap's going on today with politicians and everything else. It's same shit, same playbook.
Yeah, I mean, mobsters is a little different because that's more of like a lifestyle, a culture. They have a code. And I think the reason why people are especially fascinated with Jeffrey Dahmer is because of the cannibalism component to it.
Well, they're trying to push that too. They're trying to glorify that.
People get fascinated with that idea.
How many shows on cannibalism on Netflix right now? I can think of 3 off the top of my head, and I don't even have Netflix. I canceled that shit when the Cuties came out.
I mean, I never had any interest in it because I'm half North Korean, so we have enough stories of cannibalism that we got to deal with. So,
no, please don't. No. All right. So tonight, I was also bringing up the gangster thing because, it's also character, and how does a character, when does it become broken? When does that moral compass become broken? When does that, character start to develop where, that person's character starts to act out? Like, is it, the child, like, we're starting to hear about Jeb, how he was pretty much verbally abused by his father. And of course, his father probably treated him that way, and definitely hit him, definitely had him in fear. And so much so that he's dead, and his voice still echoes in his head. And everything he does, he hears his father's voice, whether it was, when he winced when he smoked a Bugler cigarette. If you don't know what that is, that's some low grade tobacco. And, a lot of people, you'll see a lot of military smoking those like, a week after their middle paycheck, and stuff, that's where I was introduced to Buglers and in the South. But, he hears his father's voice clearly, and, people can still haunt us in our memories as well. And it's created who he is now, but he still has that loyalty, whether it's to Sally, the still, who, as he said, fed his family and is now like his ticket out of where he is because he's got to make this money and make these, he hates being a mechanic. He likes welding, but the rest of it, he's kind of lazy about, and then he's got Skeet. Now, Skeeter, again, he wasn't thrilled with having Skeeter as a helper and putting all this in his hands. But Skeet's kind of two-faced, to where in your face, he's one way, you can count on me, I'll get it done. I told you I'd get it done. And then the minute he leaves, he does everything he told him not to do, And how does a person become like that to justify some of the things Skeeter has done? And you'll see as it goes through. And then you've got poor Dave, who's going through a divorce. He says, she got so much stuff, and when she was fine till she got with the lawyer, and then everything went crazy, and he was just so glad to break free and get this new job and a new go from New York to Alabama, which is quite the move. And I've kind of sort of did it myself, so I can attest to that. And the culture differences, and his willing to open to the southern beauty and the easy going kind of pace of some of the things, even the sign, the way it said, the way it was printed out and the way Mrs. McGee talks and everything. But to Dave's credit, I think that if you really listen, you'll see that Dave isn't underestimating anybody either. He's not taking it like some people do and take that wrong for Southern kindness and courtesy and the way people open their hearts and are kind. He doesn't take it as, okay, these people are all saps, or these people are all easy to get over on, because they're not. There's a lot of hidden stuff behind there, and I think that's a mistake a lot of people make, when they think people are kind or caring, that they think that they're not strong individuals and easily taken over. And I think you'll find that those are some of the strongest people you ever met, because they've been around the circle. They've seen injustice. They've seen people not be kind to each other, and they know what comes of it. And they've pushed past all that darkness that the world could throw at them and found the light, and are standing in that light and being kind and putting that out. But don't mess with that person, because that person's got street cred like you wouldn't believe, And I think you're going to see a little bit of that in the story tonight too. Anything you want to say, Donnie, before we get going on part number 3 and territories and treasures tonight?
No, I mean, it was last part 2 was the introduction of Jeb and I guess his dealings with his father. And actually, I could ask you some questions afterwards about Jeb and Skeet and your inspiration behind them, because they're still
Amen.
very big in the next part. Cisco, did you ever establish where Dave is actually from? Because it's very clear in the story that he's like from not around there. Like he's just there to get
New
away.
York.
He's from
He
New
was
York.
working in Albany. He was working in
Okay.
Albany, and he was from New York, because that's why she says, you're not one of those jittery city people, are you? Because he said from New York, and there's a lot of people there that are from New York now. I mean, when I was there, that's when everybody was coming in with all the big businesses and Toyota and Lockheed Martin and Boeing. And so we had a lot of people coming from, Atlanta, Georgia, New York, and all over the place. So, it's a big mixture now, but the base is Southern charm and beauty. And, the way Huntsville and Madison and even like Scottsboro and Harvest now, I've watched it grow. Everything is new. The highways, they've got it down. It's like the best of everything. They've got the old charm, and they got the new cosmopolitan too. If you look it up, Huntsville, Alabama will be in the top 5 of the most cosmopolitan cities right now. And that will blow your mind. But I saw it coming. I saw it coming in the 80s and, and definitely in the 90s. And they did it right. And they still got all the good stuff. They didn't let it ruin it, And I mean, museums and, the Von Braun Civic Center, which I think it's been changed now. They finally took a lot of Von Braun's name off of things very quietly. Isn't that odd? When Operation Paperclip and stuff started coming out. But so there you go. Oh, thank you, Bubbles. Very cool. Very cool. And that's what we're trying to do. I'm trying to show you guys a little bit of what I mean by this. I'm not just kind of just writing stuff to put it out there. This is actually to touch people. This is something that I'm leaving behind for my grandkids who might never get to, see me, or their kids. It's like we had a crazy Granny Cisco, and you won't believe the shit that she did. She's got gangsters up here and ghosts and dogmen and everything else. But there's a lesson in everything. And, like you said, Susan, about buying happiness, you can buy that. But the minute you didn't have that money, those women wouldn't hang around with you anymore, and then the women were kind of tossed to the side, and they never really had what they wanted. Nobody was fulfilled, and the people that they made fun of, the little people that went to work 9 to 5 and ate dinner together and played with their kids and read to their children and helped them with their math, their real math, not this whatever the hell this other shit is. And colored with them and did sock puppets on the wall, or shadow puppets and things like that. These are the chances that we get in this life to connect with another soul, whether it be a pet or a friend or a coworker, and they're fleeting, sometimes, as you look through your life. But like they say in the 5 people you meet in heaven, you never know when you're going to connect with that one that made such a difference, not only in your life, but theirs. And you may not even realize it unless you take the time to stop and not just smell the roses, but feel the smiles. Because there's fewer and far, they're getting few and far between out there. People are still trying to buy smiles and fill that empty void with all these things and this materialism and stuff like that. And it's just not where it is. Where it is like right here. People gathering together, like-minded people, to share a story, to tell a tale, to share some heartbreak, to share some happiness. And that's real. And that's what we're trying to do here. But I wanted to make that clear about the gangsters. I was absolutely not glorifying them. I'm like, this is what happens when you let your stuff get out of hand and you start trying to take shortcuts to that kind of happiness and that kind of fulfillment that really has to be crafted throughout a life and earned, the way it comes, and then it comes to you, and it's so fulfilling that way. So yeah, that's what I wanted to say. And ghosts can hurt people. There you go. Yeah, so don't kid yourself about that. So are you ready for the next one? This one is about an hour and a half, guys. I've got my snacks. I don't have bacon in my caramel popcorn, but I do have peanuts. I have some hot tea. Working today was something. It was funerals all day long, but they were absolutely gorgeous, and the families were very happy to have them. So, I feel like I'm doing something to give them their last hug and their, their moments and things like that. It's tough, but somebody's got to do it. And, even the gangsters, love their flowers, right? So there you go. Yep. Ted, very similar, very similar. So here we are tonight. We're doing this, and I'm going to send this one out because the last time I played this for you guys, it was dragging really bad. Ugh. I'm so glad Chrome got their shit together. Thank you, Chrome. So I want to play it again so you can get the popcorn recipe because it's tasty as all get out. And if you can make this for your kids or yourself or your family, you can also do the popcorn balls, which are kind of cool. And there's a couple of displays in here. And if you look at this display, it's so banging. If you're one of those people that have like the, people coming in or you're having a party, you go to the dollar store and you get a bunch of those plastic stemmed glasses and a can of black spray paint. Matte's better than glossy. Trust me, I'm a designer. There's something to it. But spray those glasses, turn them upside down. You can display these popcorn balls with a little, if you could do colored cellophane on the top if you wanted, or if you're just trying to do something for the family, it's really nice. And it's a nice treat that the kids can have and not worry about what's in it. It's caramel popcorn with bacon and peanuts if you want to throw that in there. So here we go, Donnie. The recipe for caramel bacon popcorn. Yum. You ought to try this. It's pretty good.
I'll try one of these days.
Yeah.
I like bacon. I like popcorn.
See how much better that looks? Look at that. Much better. Yummy. glasses. Isn't that cool?
That's pretty cool. I like the shape.
Or vintage. A little crispy. Crispy loves bacon. All right, there you go. And I just think that's a really cool look, and it's something you can do maybe with the kids because just be careful that caramel. When you're making it, it's hot. It's like pulling taffy. If you've never pulled taffy as a family, absolutely do it. It's so much fun. We got to get back to some of those old things that really it didn't just give you a nice treat to have, but man, it made memories. Making fudge or whatever with your sisters or whoever, your kids and stuff. I mean, we got to get back to those little things like that. You know what I mean? What's shaking bacon? That's true. All right. Without further ado, Mr. Cho, if you are ready, we're going to start this. I believe we meet a few more characters here. We last left off. Do you remember where we were?
Let's see. Skeet was killing rats. Dave. I think we left off with Greta and George. Because Greta, and then Jeb had his encounter with the creature while he was peeing.
And he heard some thing go down his truck, like nails and metal. Yeah. But he got away. He peed himself.
Yeah.
And Jeb's in bad shape. But we left him in the truck hauling ass down that mountain. And Skeet's in the cave, like Donnie said. He was killing rats and listening to Travis Trent, drinking lots and lots of moonshine. It got introduced to Greta and George was listening in at what Greta was saying in her sleep because she has these prophetic dreams and talks in her sleep.
Yeah.
And she was saying Rugaroo, Rugaroo. And I think Mrs. McGee and Mr. McGee are just back at the office cabin. And Dave and Rage are in their cabin, and I think he finally was getting some sleep, wasn't he?
Yeah.
He finally fell asleep after the radio thing. That's what it was. He heard the voice over the radio that said they killed me. So here we go. Oh, you know what, honey? I didn't put it there yet, Susan. I will put it in after the show. I have to wait till the show loads, if it's a live, and then once it's a live show, I have to go back into the YouTube studio, and then I can put the description under it and put the recipe in there. You're absolutely right. It's not there yet. And I would like to say this about Susan Woodcarver. If you have not seen, I don't know if you have a website, Susan, or a Facebook page, or some way you could share what you do with the class, with the chat. Please drop that link because she is absolutely talented beyond belief, and it just so happens that Mr. McGee is also a wood carver that uses a chainsaw and does some other things out of logs, and that's his thing. So I would love for you to share that with everybody. If you don't have that, you just want to share some pictures, if you want to send it to me. There you go. Susan, there you go, carves.com. All right, everybody got that? SusanAlexanderCarves.com. Please go look at this talent. And that goes for anybody here tonight, that if you have a website or you do a craft or you're an artisan, or something that you want to share, that you want to get out there, if you're a photographer, please drop that stuff in the link because we want to share that talent, because trades, talent, artisanship, we have to keep all that alive. And I'd love for everybody to share that. Yep, there you go. I have a chainsaw in my dead tree out front. Yeah. I know. And it's so funny that Mr. McGee, when I wrote this a couple years ago, if I had known, I would have used some of your pictures in here. But you'll see some of the things that Mr. McGee did here in the throughout the story. So it's kind of cool. But I just thought that was just, what a coincidence, man. Very cool. We celebrate our people here. All right, here we go. The Strange Case of Cabin 22, Territories and Treasures, Part 3. Part 3. Look at me. I'm such an idiot.
The Strange Case of Cabin 22. Part 3. George shook his wife awake. "Wake up, Greta. You are dreaming again." He shook his wife's arm gently, and she stirred awake. "Oh, my. Oh, my." She rubbed her eyes. Was I doing it again?" "Oh, yes," he told her. "It's all right, though. It's all right." Getting out of bed now, and he eased his feet into his worn slippers that were just getting right, and he wouldn't let Greta throw them out. What was it this time? Not another accident? I can't stop, was it? She sat up, worried now. No, don't worry. It was nonsense, he assured her, and she eased up a bit. In the past, her own words had scared her so, and she couldn't even remember saying them. Well, you'd think if I am to be burdened with this gift, I would remember something useful, like where I put the recipe for my mother's sriracha, or where I lost her ring that time. Don't you worry, my rosebud. All things happen for a reason, and I love your sriracha. He smiled, and she felt better, grabbing a robe from the foot of the bed and wrapping it around her. It was chilly in the room, and she looked out the window. "It is still dark. Why are you getting dressed now?" she teased. He struggled into his flannel shirt and reached for his corduroy pants. "I am on the hunt for the Swanson's thrush today," he said proudly. "Oh, how could I forget such a thing?" she smiled. "I hope this year it will be the one, that you get to take the good pictures, and you find him. And dress warm. Wear those boots I bought for you. Even though they pinch a little, they will help you on the slippery rocks." He smiled. It was their routine. She knew what he was doing, just as he knew she would be making something lovely for him to eat when he came back to the cabin, or have a crocheted scarf for him, or socks like last year when they stayed here. They came every year, sometimes in the spring and sometimes in late fall, and sometimes both, to catch migrations of birds rare to the area. This year it was the Swanson's thrush, and he would get pictures of the brown beauty and send them to the Audubon magazine with the other photos he got this season. Maybe this time he'd make the cover. "I am going to go down to the showers, get a hot soak on my back to wake me up, and then off I go before the sunrise. The thrush loves the water and the morning mist." "Well, I will be here. I have my new audiobook to keep me, and my wool work. You'd be careful out there in those woods. You call in on the hour, every hour, and don't make me wait." "Ha ha, I will," he agreed. He had bought them, her really, a little walkie-talkie set so they could talk while he was on his adventures. It made her feel better, and, if he was being honest, him too. "And if you are going this early, you'll bring some wood and stoke the fire up, and I will make you a thermos of hot coffee and pack you some of my baklava to take with you." "Thank you, Rosebud. I will get the fire before my shower now, and I will start the coffee." Looking out the window of the tiny cabin bedroom, she said to him as he grabbed up the clothes he had set out the night before with his little brown shaving bag, "The mist is thick this morning. You make sure you have your yellow light." "I do. It is in my kit with my camera and my gear, my love." Off they went to their separate duties. Fire stoked and coffee made, he carried a cup with him as he headed to the short walk to the showers. He loved his wife's coffee with just a pinch of cinnamon and eggshells to cut the bitter, she had said. And he loved the early morning, and he still had plenty of it in front of him. It was barely 4:30 a.m. Towel over his shoulder and his bags in his hand, he strolled past the other cabins and cut to the path that opened into the view of the manager's lodge. The shower stalls were located in what they called a longhouse, made of logs, of course. One longhouse for men on the right, and one for women on the other side of the general store. As he approached the lighted trail that led to the men's, he almost felt like he was approaching civilization again. The lodge was the only electric around, and it almost felt funny, even after a short time in the cabins. He could see lights on the manager's lodge from the window of the kitchen in the residence off the back end of the lodge, and knew Mrs. McGee would be making her sausage biscuits already. A very early riser. She always was, every year. And he would stop in and buy some for him and Greta to have before his adventure. His walkie-talkie was in his shaving case, and he knew hers was in her apron pocket by now. They never separated without them. He entered the Showers Longhouse, and the lights came on with the door. Something new Chuck McGee had added this year. He placed his shave case on the last sink in the row and picked the shower stall in front of it. The tiles in there gleamed and smelled of pine. The McGees kept everything spotless here. Each stall opened up to an interchanging stall, with a lock on the green wooden doors, and a bench, and a place to hang your towel in each one. "Ha!" he said as he opened it and saw something else new this year. Large shower gel soap dispensers hung in the shower wall, and bright blue shower curtains hung between the changing stall and the shower itself. Last year they had been grayish blue and much older. Good for them, he thought. New lights, new shower curtains. Things must be going well for the McGees, and he smiled. He liked them both very much. He reached in and let the shower run on hot for a moment. He got undressed and thought, "Hottest water on the mountain," Chuck McGee often said, and he sure wasn't kidding. Dave woke with a start, still with the 12-gauge across his lap. Rage woke up too, and Dave could smell a hint of that smell again. Oh, no. He looked at Rage, who wasn't growling or staring at anything. But he felt uneasy just the same. "Morning, buddy," he said to Rage. "It is morning, isn't it?" He glanced at his watch, 4:25. That was just great. He figured that the 2 or so hours he had had was going to be it today. "Coffee," he said to Rage, as he got off the couch and stretched, walked over to the kitchen and took the stovetop coffee pot he had ordered off of Amazon and took it out of the box. It came in 4 pieces, with the directions in the top pot. He took them out and threw them into the empty box the beer came in that he was using for garbage. "We got this, don't we, boy?" Rage, laying on the floor, had his head on his paws looking up at Dave with nothing but confidence, and let out a yawn. "Me too, boy." Dave dumped the coffee grounds into the top and filled the bottom with water, lit the gas stove with a match that was in a box on the counter, and said, "Let her rip." He took a can of Royal Canin out of the case, opened it with the pull tab, and looked around the kitchen, thought a moment, and grabbed a pot out of the bottom cabinet and plopped in the brown chunks. Looks good, boy." He placed it on the floor, and Rage jumped up, awake now, and Dave knew it would be gone before he got back from the bathroom. It was still dark, and he poked a fire as he walked by, making a mental note to get more wood out of the porch. He grabbed the Coleman lantern off the couch and made his way to the bathroom. He had to take a mighty piss, and the coffee would be a while anyway. The bath was small, a half bath, he recalled. A small sink and a toilet was all that was in there. What was that Mr. McGee called it? A commode, he recalled, and he set down the lantern spotlight so it beamed upwards and lit the small room in an eerie kind of way. He relieved himself and pulled the chain that hung from the tank that stood high above the bowl, and it flushed with a loud whoosh. Interesting, he thought. Commode. And he said it out loud with an understanding tone and a nod. He reached for the light and started out of the room, and the beam of the light caught a small mirror that hung over the sink. His face illuminated in the darkness of the small room. Dave could see what looked like black dirt on the glass. At closer inspection, it wasn't dirt at all, but a greasy-looking black goo that read, "Help me."
Jimmy! Yeah, come here. What's the matter, Minnie? Did you get her? Yeah, I got her. Here she is. Jimmy, meet my sister.
All right. Yeah, she sure is, Minnie.
Don't you worry, sister. We'll get you a fella before the night's over, and then you can sing sweet love songs like Kitty Wells and Ray Chris.
Skeet sat on the couch listening now to a rerun of the Grand Old Opry show playing over the radio. He was at least 2/3 of a jar into the best hooch this side of the Mississippi and feeling all right. He was still stinging from the chastising he got from Jeb. Who did he think he was, anyhow? He said out loud to the cave and the dead occupants in the twisted mess on the floor. Sally answered back with a little whistle of steam. She purred along, dripping out the gold they had so depended on these days. He comes in here ordering me round, telling me off. All I'm doing is my job. He tossed a Cheez-It toward the pile of rats that had grown by 4 since Jeb had left. "You listening to me?" he said to the rat on the top of the pile. Skeet's ball bearing had ripped half his head off, and Skeet spoke to one eye. "He thinks he's smart, keeping things from me, like the secret to his daddy's hooch recipe. I'll find it out. I tell ye, I'll get him to talking one night when we're out night fishing. Get him all loosed up on hooch, talking about his daddy in the good old days, as he calls 'em. He tells me about 'em all the time. I hated that mean old coot. He's meaner than a snake." He tossed another Cheez-It at the rat, and it landed in the muck that used to be his head. Then, he pointed a nasty finger, still with old dried rat blood on it, at the rat and emphasized his next words. "I'll get those ingredients out of him, and I'll take care of him like I did that old Bob fool down at the lake. He thought he was smarter than me, too, till I cracked his skull open with that rock." He threw his head back, laughed again, pointed his finger at the rat with a grin that grew across his face. "He looked just like you when I sunk him in the river. Put those rocks in his pocket to hold him down." The rat stared at him with a dead eye, and Skeet felt judged. I had to. He was going to tell on me. He found out I stole that money from his cabin. Wasn't much, $200, and that old pocket watch with the train on it. He reached down in his overalls and fished in there a bit and drew back his hand now, holding the gold pocket watch he'd spoke of. There was a train in full speed ahead motion, frozen in time on its surface, in raised etching. He ran his filthy fingers over it, feeling the cold gold finish. He pushed the little button on its top, and it popped open to a cream watch face with beautiful gold filigree hands and funny numbers on it that looked like letters. The watch played a little tune. Skeet closed his eyes as if taken away somewhere just a moment and listened. He opened them again, and inside the watch face it read, "To Robert eternally, your Susan." "Engraved, they call that," he said to the rat, who was still judging him with one eye. "In the grave is right." And he chuckled again. He snapped the pocket watch closed and stuffed it back in his pocket. He took another sip of the jar and talked to Farah now, hanging on the wall. "You mark me. I'll get that damn ingredient, and your boy Jeb will wish he had treated me right." He heard a scratching behind him, and he turned and sat up all at once, spilling the rest of the contents of the jar down the front of him, and knocking the makeshift metal table over to boot. Ball bearings ran out of the bag, and then everywhere, as Skeet grabbed up the Widowmaker and a few of the bearings off the floor. With a keen eye on a drunken man, he loaded and aimed at what he called Big Buck. The biggest damn rat he had ever seen, he had told Jeb one day. "Damn thing is smart and it's messing with me. Won't take bait and always gets away, pulling one trick or t'other. But I'm on it. You can count on me. You can count on me." The words echoed in his head, and he struggled to stand straight, the hooch running through his head with those words. And for a moment it looked like two big bucks running across the case of jars on the shelf. "You just hold still, you son of a bitch." He swayed a bit, got his footing, and aimed true. Pulled back on the rubber sling and let her rip. Whomp! Shards of glass and Jeb's daddy's best shine sprayed the walls and Skeet. And Skeet stepped back to steady himself. Old Buck dove straight down and ran behind the still, avoiding the aftermath of Skeet's shot. "Damn it all to hell, you little bastard. You come back and take your medicine." He stepped back and landed on the case of mason jars. His foot got tangled up in them. He jerked and kicked some out, and they broke on the floor. The room filled with the smell of shine, and Skeet was real hot now. He grabbed a hold of the huge barrel of the still to steady himself and burned his head. "Ow!" He yelled and jumped away. The rat skidded past him and ran behind a couch. "Gotcha now, you shit." Skeet moved forward to throw back the couch and finish off Big Buck. His boot landed in the pile of dead rats, and he slipped backwards, caught several of the ball bearings with his other foot, and that one move threw him back into the still. He caught a grip on the copper coils, and saved his fall. He landed on the 2x4s holding up the heart of that still. When he focused, the rat was now on top the sugar barrel, and seemed to taunt him with gray eyes and whiskers that twitched its judgment. One ear had been chewed down or tore off by another rat long ago, and Big Buck wore it like a badge. "You little shit, look what you done did, and you're gonna pay. Now the rat just sat there in front of Drew and her little butterfly tattoo, egging him on, it seemed. "I got your buddies, and I'll get you too." He bent, picked up a ball bearing off the floor, and aimed at the rat. But it was gone. Just Drew, smiling at him. "Shut up, you bitch." Skeet saw a flit of gray just in time to catch Big Buck taking a turn down the tunnel, the one with the exhaust fans. "Shit!" Skeet kicked the jar in front of him, and it broke into the steel shelf leg and slowly seeped into the pile of magazines there. Damn it, anyway. He thought a second, and he came up with what he felt was a brilliant plan. All right, I got you. He grabbed a box of Cheez-Its, and what was left he dumped on the floor at the entrance of the tunnel, turned the Coleman spotlight on and aimed it right at the pile, turned over a crate and kicked away the mess on the floor in front of the still. He sat down on the crate for the best view, grabbed a handful of ball bearings and sat 'em next to him on the boards under the still's tubing, and grabbed a jar that was rolling next to him, unscrewed it, and took a long sip. He wiped his mouth with a dirty sleeve and stared down into the darkness of that tunnel. You're going to pay for this. I got all night. I'm going to get you. You can count on me. You can count on me. He reached over to the radio that had tumbled onto the floor and turned up the song and sang along with Garth. I got friends in low places. Sally was singing too, except Skeet wasn't listening. She had got damaged in his run in with that old buck. Her pretty copper coils got pinched and poked, and she was whistling now, whistling a low, sad tune all her own. Dave took a closer look at the mirror. What was that? Is this a joke? He didn't think it was funny, and he didn't want to touch it, and reached over to the roll of tissue on the wall, unrolled a handful, and wiped at the E in me on the mirror, and looked at the black substance on the tissue paper. Black, slimy, and sure smelled bad, too. This was not at all funny, and he wondered what his welcome cabinet surprise and the guy at the window if this wasn't some sort of a prank. He rolled up the tissue, ripped off a large piece of the Kleenex box on the tiny table in the corner with its pine tree print on it, folded it over the tissue, and stuck it in his jeans pocket. He was going to talk to Mr. McGee today and get to the bottom of all this. He walked back to the living room to find Rage staring at the steam from the coffee pot and the coffee boiling out all over the stove. Oh, man! Dave wasn't having a good morning, but he made the best of it, cleaned up things, and pulled the soaked directions out of the box on the floor. He shook them off and poured a coffee into one of the provided cups and drank it, grounds and all. You gotta pee, Rage? Let's go. Out into the morning mist they went, and Rage went right back to his tree. The air smelled wonderful, and Dave sat in the rocker for a moment and took it all in. He saw lights through the trees and knew it had to be the lodge not far off at all. Hey, boy, what do you say we get a hot shower and one of those biscuits Miss McGee told us about? Bet they are early birds, too. He took a long sip of what had to pass for coffee right now and hoped Miss McGee had a better version brewing over there. Rage close in step with Dave, they walked a short distance to the showers. Rage not happy with the leash, but enjoying all the outside smells. Dave pretty much the same. He hated the leash, too. It was for the strange people, really. Rage didn't need it. He also was enjoying the outside smells. He made his way via the charming hand-painted signs to the shower longhouse, it was called. He could hear a shower, and possibly a man singing opera, or very close to it, coming from inside, and he pushed the door, and it got louder. Not too shabby, he thought. A long row of sinks stood off the wall like soldiers, gleaming in white. A matching row of large shower stalls stood on the other side, each with their own dressing stall. Nice, he thought. There was a brown shaving case sitting on the last sink in a row, and he remembered he hadn't seen one since his dad's when he was a kid, and he smiled. Steam rolled from the top of the last stall in front of the case, and the singing stopped. Hello? Dave called. Don't mind me. I'm Dave, just getting a shower. My dog is here with me, too, Rage. And Rage woofed, as if to introduce himself. "Hello there," came a voice from the steam. "Welcome aboard. I'm George. Water is good and hot." "Great," Dave smiled. "I could use it." George started a song again, lower, but just as happy, and Dave picked a shower, too, in from the first. Opened the door to the changing stall, tossed in his gym bag, and brought Rage in with him. Locked the door, and hung the loop of the leash on one of the hooks provided, and drew back the shower curtain. Nice, he thought, and turned on the hot water. Skeet stared at the pile of Cheez-Its, singing along with Johnny Cash's hurt and staticky transistor radio, and rolling 5 ball bearings around in his hand. The other hand was busy swishing around the hooch in the jar, slopping it here and there as he emphasized his favorite parts of that song. His jet black, greasy hair hung in his eyes in clump strands. He hadn't seen old Buck for a while, but he'd be back, and Skeet would be ready. "Boy, you bet I will." Johnny's song began to go in and out with the static trying to take its place. And Skeet reached out with a filthy hand and turned the transistor radio toward him, only dropping 1 ball bearing in the process, and a sliver of a grin came across his face. "I still got it. I still got a steady hand. And don't you go out on me now," he spoke at the radio. The song came back to clear again, and he smiled fully and turned back to the pile of orange cracker bait. Swaying now to old Johnny, the radio into white noise static again. And then it started to screech a bit. Skeet set down the jar on the boards, holding up the still, dropped the bearings onto the floor, and grabbed up the radio, angry now, and smacked its back where the batteries are kept. "Damn it now, that's Johnny you're messing with." He was warning the radio now. The radio went to silence, then started up the staticky wailing again. "You think you're taking care of business, do you?" A gruff voice, Skeet knew well, came from the dark tunnel of the cave behind the pile of crackers. "What?" Skeet, scared, froze and barely could speak. He looked in the direction the voice came from and picked up the Coleman and shined it all around the area. Nothing. "Oh, come on now, man. Get your sheet together, man. Hold on." He coached himself along. "You're just hearing things. That's that hooch talking." He tried to convince himself, and he laughed. The radio came back on clearly, and the volume rose to capacity, finishing Johnny Cash's song with a bang for sure. He shook his head a bit and pushed his hair back off his face and looked again down the dark tunnel. Nothing. He set the light beam back on the Cheez-Its and settled a bit, grabbed up a few ball bearings and tossed one down the tunnel. A metal click, click, click echoed and faded away as it bounced into the dark nothingness. He waited and heard nothing, and then the voice came again. "I asked you a question, boy." Skeet stood up fast and sloppy at the same time, staring into the darkness of the tunnel. He knew this voice from long ago, yet not far enough in his past for him. "Skater Davis, you're more worthless than that son of mine, that damn shocker that is." Skeet couldn't believe his ears. No, No, he's dead. I saw him put in the ground myself. Get yourself together, man." He whispered these comforts to himself. His insides felt like they went liquid. He stared into the darkness, not wanting to see what he heard. He heard one step, and then another, and a large figure formed in the shadows. Ezra Perkins took another step into the light and crushed the stack of Cheez-Its with one size 13 boot and ground the orange mess into crumbs. He smiled at Skeet, slow and long, with a toothpick in one side of his mouth. "You think you're taking care of business, do you, boy?" Skeet's knees failed him, and he hit the floor, and the world blacked out around him. "Ah, man, this is what I needed," Dave thought. The hot water eased his muscles, and he stood one hand out onto the green tile wall and leaned in and just let the water cascade down his face. And his thoughts went over the last day's events, his ex, the lawyers, an 18-hour drive from New York to Huntsville. That last bit through Tennessee nearly killed him, he thought. Should have stopped along the way for more sleep than just the stolen hour or two back in Virginia in that Cracker Barrel parking lot. He's sure most of the events at the cabin and the black mist he saw was due to the lack of sleep. But rage, he had seen and heard those things too. He opened his eyes and drew back the curtain a bit and reached into his gym bag and rooted around for the shampoo he brought. Rage was sitting there and looking right at him. Nice to have a guard, he thought, and smiled. "Few more minutes, boy. Almost done." Closing the curtain, he popped the top and poured more than he needed into his hand, and the mint and sandalwood scent filled the little space. Nice, he thought, and massaged the gel into his hair, listening to George finish his song and pick up another, and the sound of George's tap being shut off. The man's voice echoed off the tiles, and it sounded really good, he thought. He thought he heard the outside door open and close, but nothing else. Just George singing in English this time. "Are the stars out tonight? I don't know if it's cloudy or bright." Just then, something grabbed Dave's ankle and held on tight. He let out a surprised sound from deep inside and opened his eyes, not knowing what had just happened, and caught a glimpse of a large black thing retreating quickly back into the space between where the tiles ended and the green wood partition started. Rage started barking, and Dave jumped into the little dressing area Rage was in, darting one open eye back and forth at his feet and the open space around the shower. George yelled, "Dave, is all okay?" Rage was looking, too, in between barks, and Dave grabbed the loop of the leash, using one burning eye to see, and unhooked the latch to the wooden door, swung it open, and tried to look at the door to the bathhouse exit. It was just closing, and he caught a glimpse of something large and black in the last 4 inches of outside he saw. "David!" a voice from behind. Dave opened his eyes again, shampoo lather running down his face and neck. He blinked, and a man, medium-built, pot-bellied, and balding, with a hefty mustache, wearing nothing but a towel, stood in front of the last shower stall. "Are you okay? What happened?" Rage sat by Dave, gave a whisper of a growl, and Dave said, It's okay, Rage," as he wiped the lather out of his eyes. "Yes, I think. Did you see? I better go after her." He spoke all at once in broken sentences. "What?" George said as he approached. "Well, you must be Rage," he said to the dog, and Rage wagged his tail. "You'd better stay here," and gestured toward Dave's nakedness. Dave only realized then he was standing there naked. "Yes, please go and see if you see anything." And George did, as Dave grabbed a towel, wiped his eyes, and wrapped the towel around him. George opened the door and peered out. "What am I looking for, David?" "Something huge and black," Dave answered, using his flannel shirt to wipe his face and eyes. I see nothing but darkness, George replied. Can you tell me what happened? He asked as he came back. Something grabbed my ankle from under the wall partition, and must have been in this stall. Dave kicked the door open to the first stall with a bare, wet foot and saw a black streak on his ankle as he did. George pointed. Odd that. And he saw it the same time Dave did. Dave sat down on the bench and lifted his foot, touched the black streak, and rubbed the substance in his fingertips. It felt greasy, and he smelled it. Motor oil? Grease? He had no idea, and he was questioning his own mind. I don't know what is happening here, but I see your ankle is turning red. Is it motor grease, you said? George questioned. I don't know, Dave said, but it was something all right. Why would anyone do such a thing? But it was huge, the part I saw, and the hand or paw or whatever it was also huge. But I didn't get a good look either time. Rage sat between them, and George held his towel up with one hand and extended another out toward Dave. Well, I am George. Pleased to meet you. Dave's eyes, still stinging, reached out and shook his hand and said, I'm glad to meet you. That's Rage, and I'm Dave. Let me look again. George went to the outside door, opened it, and looked around, and then shut it. I don't see anything. Looks like the McGees are up, though. You should get that soap off. I have to shave, so I'll stay here while you finish. Keep an eye on things. We can get a good look around out there together. He nodded toward Rage. Okay if I pet him? George said, Sure. That okay, Rage? And it was, and George scratched his head. He saw it, too. I heard him barking. George remarked. Yep, he did. Darn leash probably kept him from reaching it, though. He can stay out here with you if that's okay. Nothing will get in. Just don't let him out, okay? George smiled. Sure. We will have a song and a shave, won't we, boy? Go ahead, Rage. And off they trotted toward the far sink. Dave got back in the shower and thought about the black goo on the mirror. It wasn't the same, he thought. This one smells like motor oil, dirty motor oil, and the other one stunk to high heaven. He remembered he had the tissue wrapped in the cardboard in his jeans. And the men finished, and Dave felt better in his fresh clothes, and George told him of his adventure to getting a sighting of the thrush, and hopefully some good pictures, and told him about Greta's baklava, and about the trail to the good fishing spot off the Blue Trail, and he had suggested Dave take that one for good fishing. They left the shower building together and walked on up the manager's lodge. Dave's eyes were still burning, and he thought he could find it blindfolded if he needed, because he could smell those biscuits and coffee, too. George continued to call him David, and that was fine. Sounded right coming from this gentle character. George was neatly shaven and full of life, and joked about his need to call in to Greta. She feels better when I do. Yes, Rosebud, I will be back shortly, he finished with over. A crackling voice came back. Dave couldn't make out what it said. No, not too late to catch the morning mist. Getting some biscuits from the McGees. Need anything else? Over. The crackling. Careful. Over is all Dave caught. Will do. Over. George put the walkie in his vest pocket now, a brown hunter's vest with so many pockets Dave chuckled a bit. If you meet Greta today, I would ask you not to mention your incident just yet. David. She upsets easily, and Dave said no problem, and that he understood. They reached the door to the little general store, and George reached to open it. When we have a moment to talk, I will tell you a few things I have heard going on around here. Dave's sore eyes widened. Mr. McGee has a no-nonsense approach to the weirder things. And he won't take kindly to his guests being bothered on this campground, though. Let's get a cup of coffee, and I will tell you what I know. And Dave agreed. All three went inside the dimly lit store. Mrs. McGee did have coffee. Dave got a large cup, black, and 3 biscuits. Mrs. McGee put 3 of her homemade peanut butter dog biscuits in a brown bag and gave Rage another. They said nothing about the incident. Outside, they sat at a large picnic table on the side of the general store. George told Dave that there was talk here and there about seeing things like a black mist or a large black thing just off the trails. 2 days ago, he spoke with a woman while her 2 boys fished in the river off the Blue Trail. She had asked him if he had heard anything going on around here. George had told her he and his wife had been coming up here almost 8 years, sometimes twice a season. Nothing seemed to go on until this last spring. George leaned in toward Dave when he said that she told him she had to change her cabin and that she and one of her boys saw something in the first one, something big and black. It had a bad odor and it scared them very much. They had stayed in 22 like you, Dave. Dave was relieved and shocked at the same time. Dave told George that he had seen something, but he wasn't sure. Do you think it was the same you saw at the showers? Dave remembered the tissue, took it out of the cardboard, and showed it to George. Whew, that stinks, George winced, and folded it back up. It's not the same as today. That was dirty motor oil, if I had to guess. What is going on around here, George? I don't know, David, but my wife has taught me things I never thought I'd believe. Over the years, I have seen things, too. Things science and common knowledge can't explain away. Dave told him of the incidents in the cabin, the cabinets, and everything else, and feeling better now that George wouldn't think he was crazy. And he didn't. I can tell you this. Old Bob, that's what everyone called him, lived in that cabin over a year. They found him drowned in of a fishing accident, they said, down by the river. It's a huge lake off of the river off the Blue Trail. And he was there where that mouth opens and water gets rough on those rocks. But it just doesn't sound right to me. I got the story in pieces and been trying to put it together myself. There are a lot of repeat campers here and yearly stayers down at the RV park. Word gets around. McGee is a decent, hard-working man and tries to keep a lid on it. He has a full house this week. All the cabins are booked. He does his best to keep it safe and peaceful. Word got out that the woods are haunted or something, and has been doing his best to hold back those paranormal groups from running around with cameras and such. Dave nodded. He just doesn't want to get a bad reputation up here in the cabins, but he's trying to do his best. You can't keep people out, though, if they want to get in. I think that's why the McGees have been so busy this season, able to add on extras this year. Just my thoughts, though. It makes sense. I can't tell you exactly what's been going on in my cabin, but I have my eye on it. Have you heard anyone else other than the lady with the 2 boys? Dave asked. Joan. A little. Still trying to fit the pieces together. I can tell you more this evening if you like. I usually come out here by the fire pit, enjoy a cigar with Chuck McGee. I can tell you again, though, he is a non-believer. Calls it nonsense. I truly think it scares him. So we can meet a touch earlier if you like. McGee doesn't usually come out till about 10 p.m. or so. That work? Dave said that it would be fine. 9 p.m. then. George told Dave he would be headed down the Orange Trail to get close to the little waterfall where the thrush may be. That there was everything the Swanson thrush loved. Best fishing is off the green, the yellow, and the blue trails. Follow the signs. They talked a bit about fishing, and Dave laughed about going around back and trying the worm machine. George said goodbye to Rage, who took to him right off, agreeing to meet again tonight. Dave gathered his 2 other biscuits and the bag of peanut butter treats for Rage, went around to the worm machine, put in his quarters, and got a little box with, worms and dirt in it. Amazing, he thought. George called back to Dave. Dave, have you ever heard of anything called a rougarou? Dave thought for a moment and walked up to where George was. He had not. What is it again? A rougarou. Dave shook his head, but told George he had planned on going down to the mountain to grab some supplies, and he should have a signal there, and he would be happy to look it up on his phone for him. Technology, George laughed and waved a hand and a thank you as he cut off the dirt road toward the cabin and Greta. Dave walked on with Rage. Rougarou, Rage. You ever hear of that one? Rage just kept his eye on a squirrel who darted across the road, and Dave got his fishing stuff out of the truck, and they went back inside the cabin. Everything in its place. Dave checked the contents of the tackle box and sat down to finish eating and read the directions of the coffee pot. George set up his tripod for his camera. The waterfall was lovely. The mist was just starting to lift from the grass. Thistle and wild black-eyed Susans danced to the sounds of the earth waking up. Even the kudzu was pretty here. Calls his ears knew began to sing to him, cardinals, chickadees, ruby-crowned chicklets, and a mourning dove called to her mate, and the waterfall was their accompaniment. Binoculars around his neck, he set up his second tripod off to the direction of the downstream river. He had an overview here of several of the trails that widened around below him. The yellow trail marked every so often with the splotch of yellow paint on a tree, or an unassuming wood sign low to the ground marked the trails. Blue to his right, snaked in and out, and clear around the side of the mountain. A long one for sure. There were 12 marked trails in all. He had walked them all over the years. Here was the best spot to wait for the thrush. Opened his little folding stool, took out the thermos of coffee and a piece of Greta's baklava, and sat down to wait and listen. Dawn was cracking, and the boys were thrilled to finally get to Old Blue today. They had finished breakfast and were getting their fishing gear. Joan smiled and was glad that things were picking up since they moved cabins. She packed her book, hoodies, and things for the boys and some snacks in her backpack. The boys were goofing on each other and grabbing their fishing gear. "Off we go, boys," she called after them. "I'll beat you," yelled Jacob to his big brother. "No, you won't either," Mike answered, and they sped past Joan like whirlwinds, and Joan laughed. "Wait for me now," and shut the door. George heard the familiar song he was waiting for and slowly lifted his binoculars and followed the sound. His excitement rose as he alternated from the binoculars to his eyes and then back again, zeroing in on that sound. There she was, the Swanson's thrush. He quickly let the binoculars quietly fall around his neck and lifted the camera that was there. Snap, snap. He took multiple shots. Eased his step back and used the camera on his tripod. Snap, snap. The thrush skipped over to another branch. The morning sun shone on its feathers. Another round from the camera around his neck. She flew off and landed on the branch with the little waterfall in the background. And George moved behind the tripod again, focused, and set off a series of good shots. The brown beauty flew up and over the stream, and George followed her with his binoculars so he could catch another shot. She was gone. But some movement caught his eye. A small boy, seeming to, I don't know, track a rabbit with the cunning and skill only a boy could have. He chuckled. He was on the trail down below, and George looked further up the trail and saw a woman with another boy. It was Joan, doing something with Mike's shoe. He slowly focused back to little Jacob, not far away from them, but enough to be scary, he thought. Out here, anyway, there's holes and rock slides. What was the boy doing now? The rabbit turned off the trail and went further into the thicket, and the boy followed. George focused in. The brush was very thick here, and he could only see flashes of the boy. And then the boy standing near rocks and lots of kudzu covering most of it. He was pulling on the vines and pulling back those green vines with the large leaves. Jacob reached in his back pocket and got a flashlight and pulled at the vines again, and they gave way, and the boy seemed to step into the small opening and just disappeared. "What in the hell?" George whispered. "That's not good at all. A hollow in the rock? A cave, maybe? Oh, no." He stood up on the rock near his camera tripod. "Hello!" he yelled, waving his hands. "Hello!" He focused on the woman with his binoculars and yelled again. Nothing. The waters from the falls, maybe, drowning out his calls. Oh, no, he thought. This is not good at all. He threw his cameras in his bag. He'd come back for the rest, his tripods and his stool. Threw his backpack on and made his way down the rocks that he had climbed up on, his pinching boots doing their job to help him ease down. Greta was right. The grip on these were good. He would hurry to warn Joan, but even at his best it would take longer than he wanted it to. Jeb woke up and his head just hurt. Oh, man. Not only because of the position he had fell asleep in, with his head on his desk in his office in the back of that old garage, but he had sat in his truck for a while after his run-in on the road last night, and he drank the contents of a flask that he had carried in his truck. It used to be his daddy's flask. Still had his initials on it, too. When he was done with that, he drank the moonshine he kept in his desk. The combo was wreaking havoc on his head right now. He was foggy, too, and he smelled like piss. How long had he been here trying to get this experience out of his head? Whew. It just wasn't possible that he saw what he thought he saw on that road. Just not possible at all. He was behind now, too. Hadn't done a stitch of work on that John Deere he had to finish. Oh, just wasn't possible. He thought again, shook his head. He rubbed his face and blinked and looked up toward the dirty window, and the sun streaked in through the dirty glass, and he knew he had slept through the night. Oh, man, I done it now. I gotta get that tractor done. He tried his best to stand up, and his head spun, and he sat back down. The front of his head was banging, and he was in bad shape. He opened the drawer to his right of his old beige metal desk. Just the sound of the metal slide on the drawer made him wince in pain. Stuck his hand inside of the drawer and felt around. Took hold of a jar of aspirin. Shook out about 10 of them into his hand and threw them in his mouth and chewed 'em up. He slowly got up and made his way to the old garage bathroom sink that was covered in greasy handprints and had a chip missing off one corner. And he pulled the string that turned on the light and winced at the brightness of it. He turned on the spigot and reached down and drank the water from the faucet, held his head back to swallow the aspirin, and then repeated it. Then he threw some water on his face and looked into the dirty mirror. As he stared at his reflection in the filthy glass, he heard his father's voice. "You sure are a mess, boy. You ain't taking care of business. You are worthless. That's what you want to be. Worthless. Go and handle your business." This last part tore through his head as if his father was standing right there, and he pinched his nose between his eyes to hold pain from running across his face. That's when he remembered Skeet still at the cave watching the still. "I double damn guarantee that old son bitch got drunk and didn't finish his job either." He quickly threw more water on his face, lifted off his old cap, brushed his hair back tight against his head, put the cap back on, and fast headed out of the back door to where he always parked his truck, round the back of the old garage. As he opened the door, the sun hurt his eyes, and he squinted and winced. He squeezed his eyes shut, then opened them and focused on his old green Chevy. Fumbled for the keys in his pants pocket. Yes, he thought, they were there, and made his way toward the truck, mumbling to himself about how Skeet better have finished those last 2 cases of hooch. He stopped in mid-stride, dead in his tracks, squinted again, then focused on the side of the pickup. There were 4 long claw mark scratches from the start of the passenger side door to above the back wheel well. They were deep and actually dented along each one with the force and power of the beast that was behind them. From the top mark to the 4th, the width measured as wide as the hubcaps on his tires. Jeb felt his chest get tight and his stomach started to whirl, and he bent over and threw up.
I see you, la 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 la.
Jacob knew he wasn't going to catch that rabbit. He knew. "I'm not dumb like my brother and my mama think. Rabbits run fast," he thought. But just like that girl who was dumb in that book that Mom had read last year, he was going to see if this rabbit would show him something. Something, I don't know, secret? Jacob whispered this last word to himself like it was magic. He'd just quick see if this was something back here. A hideout, maybe? Treasure, like that other book with that pirate. You know, the one with the stick for a leg. The rabbit had led him this far. This was a secret cave. The door was hidden with that green vine stuff. But the rabbit, he knew it was here. So many stories he had remembered had caves, he thought. As he made his way behind the rabbit, it did seem to lead him. It took a quick turn at the entrance and followed a small, tight tunnel, and Jacob got down low and quickly followed with his light. Oh, Mom would be mad for sure. But if he found treasure, she'd forgive him, wouldn't she? On they went. Jacob saw an opening ahead, and the rabbit took off. "Hey, wait for me," he whispered. Jacob put the little flashlight in his mouth and crawled forward after the fuzzy little guy with the secret hiding spot. Joan took the rock out of Mike's shoe and tied the laces in what she called a mama knot. just a double knot, but she started calling that after Mike stuck his 6-year-old foot up with his old dirty Converse sneaker on it and asked for a mama knot, 'cause it kept coming loose, Mama. She laughed at the memory and tossed his hair, which he hated, and she tried to do that at least once a day, and said, "Stay close now. Those sinkholes are deep, you know." Mike looked over her shoulder. "Hey, Mama, where's Jacob?" Panic hit Joan in a tight squeeze in her chest, and she quickly turned around. "Jacob? Jacob? Come out here now." She ran back up the trail a bit, retracing their steps, her head racing. Okay, he was just here. Mike started calling too. "Come on, you little goof. We're going to be late for the fish." Parent panic started to settle in fast on Joan's chest, and she was fast into full throttle mom. "Jacob, you come out here right now. This is not funny." Prayers, ideas, and help me gods all played in her mind at once, and she mindlessly grabbed Mike's arm as she backtracked her steps, keeping him close till she could see them both together and okay. "Jacob!" Rage was loving this adventure now, sans the collar and the long leash, running circles around Dave, up the trail and back down, sniffing everything. Dave walked with his tackle box in one hand and the pole over his shoulder, and that made him think of that old Andy Griffith show, and he just laughed. By the signs, they were a quarter-mile into the Blue Trail. Fishing spot wasn't far off from what George told him earlier. It was a beautiful morning, and this is exactly what he had come up here for. Rage nosed at a butterfly, bright orange in the sun, that was sitting on a rock, and he wished he had brought a camera. Dave thought he heard a woman yelling, but the echo and the sounds of the outdoors distorted it. He stopped. There it was again. "Jacob?" he thought. Skeet woke with a start, heard the transistor playing a forgotten staticky tune. His head felt like a brick. Where am I anyway? He focused above him, squinted his eyes. The cave, he thought. Oh, man, my head. He pushed his feet to get up, and the room seemed to spin. He focused on sitting up instead. He held his head in his hands, palms to his eyes. Oh, this is a bad one. He ranked this hangover. No stranger to them. He looked up and around him, trying to remember. The place was a mess. He tried to push himself up again and grabbed onto the crate and sat on that, looking at the tossed-up couch and broken jars on the floor. Man, this is a mess. Slowly, the events started to come into focus. The damn rat! Ouch! This made his head split. He palmed his eyes again and felt like he was holding his face on. Just then, he remembered the dream he'd had. Oh, that was no dream. That was a nightmare. He told himself, "You gotta get it together, man." He remembered Sally and turned himself around on the crate to check the drip jar. Scared he had let her run over. As he did, he looked toward the pile of Cheez-Its. They were crushed into dust. He heard a whistling in his head as his fear came back home, and he realized it was no dream. "That's right, shithead. I'm right here." Ezra stepped into the light of the Coleman still going on, smiled at Skeet, took out the toothpick, and pointed at the still. "Game over, you worthless shit!" Terrified, Skeet looked uncontrollably toward the still with his jaw hanging open. The whistle that was coming from Sally. His eyes opened wide in realization. Oh, you have been listening to The Strange Case of Cabin 22, Part 3. What just happened after the still blew up? Did Ezra's ghost come to try to stop the still from blowing? What is Jeb going to do now that he knows that he was attacked by something in the woods? What was that large wolf, man, dog thing? Tune in and find out. Part 4 of The Strange Case of Cabin 22.
Well, there you go, Donnie.
There you go.
There goes old Skeet. Game
Went
over.
Boom.
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 Game over, you worthless shit.
I like the way you say that. You worthless shit.
That one part was so much fun, man. Setting up that thing where he's stepping on things. He steps on the pile of rats and slips on that, puts his foot down. He was having a bad night. He steps on the ball bearings and slips and grabs a hold of the copper coils and pinches them, and just all this different stuff that happened in this whole rat thing with old Buck, to me, was very Moby Dick. If you've ever read Moby Dick, how it just made Captain Ahab go out of his common sense, and it became personal with him, and the rat, to the point where he destroyed his own crew and ship. So that's what old Buck was to me. And so did you kind of pick that up, Donnie? It was kind of sort of like that.
Yeah, you get the sense that he was kind of obsessed with it and was out for his blood, and it was the one that always got away because it was just a little too smart.
Yep. And it was the biggest one, and he had that, his ear is missing. Part of his ear is missing, and he kind of like wore it like a badge. He was actually jealous of this rat because the rat had so much, so many moves and kept getting away, and I think Skeet really hated anybody that had something he didn't, or knew something he didn't, or really knew that he was. You'll see later through other characters talking about him that he kind of had this, he resented being who he was, but he was going to be who he was, to get back at the people, and he was going to take what he wanted, and he was going to do the things that he shouldn't do. And, I don't know how he developed that way, his character. I didn't really have a backstory on Skeet, but
Any inspirations for Skeet?
There was a couple of people that kind of reminded, I could say that kind of remind me of him, but not that bad, could have gone that way. Throughout your life, you see people that you just know that they're going down a wrong road, and they're, unless they get, take a hard right, somebody helps them, or life, makes them take they're not going to end well.
Yeah.
He's just a low down character. He had the way he had the watch, and he was making fun of it. It was such a beautiful thing with this beautiful little love song between, old Bob, it said Robert, but it was Bob and Susan. And she had given it to him, and it was the world to him. And that little song, my grandmother had when my grandpa was in the war, he brought back a little, what was called a powder, I forget what you would call it, like a little powder container, but it was made in Japan and had all this like inlay on the top of it, and mother of pearl and jade and stuff like that. When you took off the top and you pulled the little pearl pin out, it would play that song. And it's quite it was a little memory and an homage to her and to him. And I've got those all through this, But and again, the gold watch is basically from the House that Wouldn't Die.
I also
You know.
like that we got a little bit of your singing in this part as well.
I was singing like old George though, like he would. I could just see him sitting there washing his belly, his big old mustache, and everything else. George is a great character, and he just really wants that, Swanson thrush, and he's been trying to get his pictures on the cover of the Audubon magazine, and he's been trying all his life. And it's, if you've ever met a character like that they really go all out. And Greta's just really supportive, and he supports her stuff, and it's just great. They come up there all the time, and he's the character that you kind of get to see how much the cabins have improved since the last time he was there. So why are they improving? Are they making more money? Is there more money? Is there more business going on? What's going on, and what's making that happen? And you've also got to think of poor Jeb. He was thinking, he could talk himself out of seeing what he thought, that what he really did see. And he was trying to talk himself out of it. When he saw that truck and the claw marks coming down the side, he couldn't deny it anymore. And he just doubled over and puked, and he's laying in the gravel. And now the still is gone. And that's going to cause a cascade of events. Little Jacob is in the cave. Joan is screaming for him. Dave and Rage are there, and he can hear Joan because he's on the other side of the Blue Trail. And George is on his way down the mountain to warn Joan that he saw Jacob disappear into this little cave. And tomorrow night we'll see what happens after the explosion. But Ezra's ghost came back, and that's Jeb's daddy. And he came back to, either warn Skeet, hey, the still's going to blow, or why did Ezra come back? And is that all we see of Ezra, or is he going to be around again? We'll see. It's coming up. And I can't thank you enough, guys, for being here. I'm glad you're having a good time. I couldn't begin to explain the scent of fairy dust, but it's kind of nice. My favorites are like cinnamon and the dragon's blood and stuff like that. But every once in a while, a little fairy dust doesn't hurt anybody. It's kind of magical, fruity magical. It's not too sweet, but it's, and it's glittery. The stick is glittery, it's kind of nice. I don't know. But they've got some good ones out there. All right, guys, listen, tomorrow night, same time, not a snuff box. It's a powder box, I guess you would call it. Back in the day, you used to take your loose powder and put it in, and you'd have the big puff, so they were going back to the 40s, when they were just together. And he had just come back from the war and brought it for her. He just loved my grandma, and
By the way, what was that dish that Greta kept talking about? The baklava or whatever?
Baklava. Baklava is a very it's a very flaky, kind of like a phyllo crust, if you're familiar with that at all. It's a very flaky crust. Some people put a lot of honey in it. It's got like a chopped minced nut filling in it, and it's just a little pastry.
Oh, it's a pastry.
Yeah,
Okay.
it's like a sticky, flaky pastry, and you get it in usually they cut it in tiny little triangles. It would be like the size, almost like cutting the corners off a sandwich. That's about how big it is. So it's just like a little sticky pastry that she makes, and and he loves that and her coffee. And she lost her mom's recipe to this bread that they make, and she was mad about that. She's so struggling with this ability that she has. She cannot remember what she says when she's dreaming or when she starts speaking in this, and she can't remember, and she can't use it for herself. Like, she lost her mother's ring, and she lost her mom's recipe. She can help other people find things sometimes, but she has no control over it. So she's just trying to figure it out. And because George listens and tells her later, they're able to work through some of that. So we're just getting into all of that. We've got
Susan
a lot more
Woodcarver asked, please tell me how big is a ball bearing? Marble size, pea size? I want to picture it.
The ball bearings that he was shooting were probably I want to say like a 30 millimeter, if that helps at all. So a little bit smaller than a regular size marble, not the Aggie, but the regular size marbles would be just about that size or a little smaller. That's the ball bearings he was shooting. So pretty good size. I mean, enough that if you're going to shoot it with a slingshot like that, with that rubber back, he called it the Widowmaker, and he made it down in the garage because apparently they all hung down at the garage, and he welded it and made a good slingshot. You could do some damage. You could really do some damage with one of those things, and he was killing the rats with it, and he got pretty good at it. So, and thanks, mods, my Black Ops mods, for baking those cupcakes. I appreciate you guys, and all my wrench bearers out there, all my gatekeepers, our light workers, our light grounders, our talented people. Go ahead and share those websites again if you have any links. We've got artists here. We've got so many talented people and so many people that do trades or are still teaching the things that they did. And I think that's wonderful. Pass that talent on. And, if the best thing you can do with something like that is teach somebody young, to appreciate what you're doing, whether it's working on cars or playing guitars, pass it along, because I don't think too many good people are teaching our kids right now. So try to do that, or leave a little something behind for, like
I'm always teaching kids about video games. They seem pretty receptive to it.
Yeah, I bet they do. You have a hard time, don't you? Have to bribe them and everything. Thank you so much, Sasha Bell, for sharing the T Public shop, and I appreciate that very much. Thank you to all you people that found the little thank you heart that's underneath the permanent videos on there. I thank you very much. Gray, thank you. And everybody that sent PayPal and everything else, and the super chats. I love you, each and every one of you, and thumbs up or share it or do whatever. This is a great Halloween story, and I really appreciate you sitting here. Gave me something really look forward to this week. And Donnie, can't thank you enough for sitting here and doing this with me. It's been fun. We are only on part 3.
Yeah.
We're like halfway there. As far as chapters, but they get longer each time. So tomorrow night it's a little longer, and then as we get into the weekend, then we should finish up on Hell Night, which is great because it'll actually be Hell Night in the story. So we can't get any luckier than that. So
actually,
have a happy Halloween.
Actually, once the explosion happens, that's when the story starts really ramping up. So you're going to want to tune in. And also, because we mentioned tuning in, Steve is going to be on at 10:15, and he's going to be live with Jamie, and she is a very lovely woman. So I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, terrific! Everybody get over there and support Steve. Tell him I send my love.
Yep, I'm looking forward to seeing all of you there, and we're gonna keep this party going. It's going to be a fun week overall, I think.
I love you all. Ted, we'll see if we can get you a lighter, sweetie, or find out who keeps stealing yours. It's probably the little people, like you said. Love you all so much. Thank you all for being here, and see you tomorrow night. Same time, same rat channel for old Buck. Good night, everybody. Thanks for coming in tonight. Thanks, Donnie. You were great.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Oh, gosh, yeah, it's a pleasure. It's an absolute pleasure. Like I said, this has really got me over these past couple weeks, man. I don't know what I'd do without y'all, and we're going to keep it rolling. I love you all. See you over at Steve's. Bye-bye.